That's all good. What we'd love you to start off with, please, everybody, is just find the chat box at the bottom and just pop in the chat box who you are, where you're from, what you make, and this is your opportunity to do a bit of networking together. If we were in a room, you will be chatting away. So if we can get some of that, get your web addresses in that box. So hopefully we can get some interaction going across the morning, which would be fantastic. We've got an amazing room here this morning. I was just looking through, we've got everything from staircases, marine, lighting, bakery, electronics, boat building, orthotics, design, skincare, print, decking, hydrogen, pharmaceuticals. The room is amazing. We're really, really pleased to have you all. So what have we got in store? I'm going to ask Nathan to load me up some slides so we can give you a bit of an idea of what's happening. We're also going to be using a brilliant bit of interactive software, which I'm going to introduce you to in a minute, because we want to get you talking virtually. The main star of our event today is Mr. Steve Morris, who is the chairman and CEO of Morgan Motors. We've been delighted to be working with Steve over the last couple of months to bring you this session, and we're going to be focusing very much on manufacturing innovation. The Morgan story is fabulous, and I know that you're going to have a really interesting morning. We're bringing you the program which is Future Focus. It's an ERDF funded program, so all of those Cornish-based SMEs are eligible for support through the programme. It's delivered by Unlocking Potential in partnership with the University of Exeter, and it's a brilliant marriage of being able to bring you very, very practical business support as well as access to a bank of brilliant academics, and there'll be a bit more about that as the morning goes on. What I'd like to do, if we can just move on a slide, is to say a huge thank you to Cornwall's Manufacturers Forum. And we've got Eric here this morning, and we've been working with Eric to design this session, and it's down to Eric and lots of help from John Hurrell that we've got all of you in the room. So a good morning to Eric.
Morning, Ali. Morning, everybody. A very foggy G7 welcome to everybody. Great to be here today. Big thank you to Ali and Andy and all the UP team for working with us to put together the first of these sessions. This is really exciting stuff and just shows how well Cornwall and its business community does collaborate. Fantastic to be welcoming Steve Morris from Morgan today. Morgan, one of the UK's most iconic brands, and you know, a fantastic example of UK manufacturing that we're all so proud of, and we really look forward to hearing from Steve today about his story and the story of Morgan, and learning a little from it and some things to take away. So great to see everybody, and thanks again to all the team for putting this together.
Thank you very much for that, Eric. That's fantastic. So I'm gonna get you warmed up, everybody. I'd like to introduce you to a bit of software called Pole EV. So if you've got a phone handy, if you can just pull up, Sophie's popped the link there in the chat. So plug that into your phone, and you should come up with a nice bit of software. You need to just pop in Unlocking Pot 031, and it will introduce you to a lovely set of questions that we're going to have a bit of fun with. And it's not just about having some fun, because we're going to be using these a bit later on in the morning, where we have a competition where you can win some very interesting prizes. So you then, once you've logged in, you just pop your name in. It's important to pop your name in, and you'll understand why that's important later. And I'm just going to give you a few minutes just to click onto that. So first question up, how are you feeling this morning? Probably a little bit terrified that I've now whacked a bit of unusual software in front of you. You know, we're in interesting times, guys, here in Cornwall. We've got the G7 upon us. We've got through the start of Brexit. We've got some people that are obviously looking happy and excited. We've got a few people who are looking a bit stressed and worried. Nobody who's angry this morning, that's great. But I'm surprised we haven't got any of the naughty little devils, because we know entrepreneurs in Cornwall are a little bit wicked. So nobody's selected D yet. So just a few more minutes to log on. Tell us how you're feeling this morning. Overwhelmingly happy. Few people are worried. Okay. Have we got good numbers, Nathan, that are participating? Nathan's having a look at the software in the background.
Yeah, no, there's been a lot of activity. There
are the naughty ones. I knew they'd come through at the end. The minute I said naughty, Mark Norton, I know that was you. Oh, look at how it's changed. Look at that. So Steve, that's your room, okay? So look, everybody's changing it to naughty now. So that's what you've got in store this morning. And everybody's now getting a good sense of how you use the software. So a predominantly naughty and excited room. That's going to be fun for us all. I'm surprised there aren't a few more worried people now. I'm certainly getting a bit worried about that. Let's move on to the next question. So this is a really interesting one. As manufacturers, what words would you use to describe your current challenges? Keep it clean, please, folks, because your responses as you type them in will start to appear up on the screen. Why am I not surprised that supply chain's the first one up there? People, absolutely. We were having a chat with Steve just before we joined you, and all of the things that are his challenges, Eric absolutely concurred. Space, that's another really interesting one. I think generally we're finding recruitment across all sectors is massively difficult. People are sticking firm with where they are. There's not a lot of movement going on at the moment. So it's a bit of a challenge. Really interesting stuff there. Keep those coming in. Costs rising massively. Scaling, moving to Europe, that's an interesting one. Brexit, we know. Fantastic. Well, brilliant. We will capture all of that. I don't think there's anything in there that is a big surprise. We've got some stuff around slowdown there. Okay, that's really interesting. Great word cloud, thank you. Ready to go on to the next one, Nathan. So with challenges, tell us about your opportunities. Every cloud, what are the opportunities that you are currently interested in investigating? You know, I think lockdown, Brexit has really stretched our problem solving muscles over the last 15 months. So we know that you've had to all pivot and do some amazing things to keep things going. But, you know, with that comes opportunities. It gives us an opportunity to have a relook at our businesses, how we do things. So here we go. Here they're coming through really nicely now. So new techniques, innovation, remote working, massive opportunity. Harder for manufacturers, you know, to do remote working, but absolutely possible in many cases. B Corp, massive wave of B Corp opportunity here in Cornwall. We love B Corp here. Design, embracing UK design. Wow, look at that. Keep them coming, guys. What a brilliant amount of stuff that you're looking to investigate. That's fantastic. Lovely. So fair to say, I think you've got the hang of PolyV. We are going to be using it later competitively, so keep that alongside you. I think that's our last one for now. Oh no, right, one more question. So before we get Steve on, tell us how much you know about Morgan already. Okay, we've got a few people there, know quite a bit. Lots of you here, I guess, because you're really keen to learn. Have we got any Morgan owners or Morgan groupies in the room? Be interesting to see. Any 4s or 5s? No? great potential audience for you then, Steve. The fun can commence. That's brilliant. Okay, so on to the next slide. What words spring to mind for you when you hear the word Morgan? Okay, what is Morgan synergistic for? What is it that it creates? Tradition, wood, classic, British, yeah, keep them coming. Craftsmanship, windy. I like that one. Jeff, was that you? I wonder. That's fantastic. Tradition, craftsmanship, quality, exclusive. That's fantastic. Are you pleased with those words, Steve? Are you happy with those?
Yeah, very much so. I'm quite surprised I haven't seen a John Harvey Jones or a wooden chassis. Usually two that come into it, but no, it's good, nice ideas.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. We promised that would be a useful one for your marketing team. So
they're stood in the wings watching.
Come on, Cornwall, give them some more stuff to work with. Other words when you hear the word Morgan. We'll keep that one there just for a second. Exclusive, I like that one. I really like that one. Brilliant. British, look, and actually what happens with PolEV is the more people that use the same words, the bigger the words get. So that's, I guess, a lot of those there are throwback. That's indigenous. Look at this. Some great words there, guys. Fantastic. That's brilliant. Lovely. So on we go to the next slide. And I think that's enough of a warm-up. Without further ado, I want to get Steve online for you. What an incredible story the Morgan story is. And as ever, I'm always fascinated with the human story that sits behind it. So the man behind the driving wheel of the Morgan Motor Company, Mr. Steve Morris, joined as a 16-year-old sheet metal apprentice, and he's going to tell us a little bit more about that as we go, and today sits as chairman and CEO. So I think it's an incredible journey. We know that we know a bit more. We've seen the presentation, so it is an amazing journey. And what an amazing individual to have gone through and joined what was a very, very traditional business, and to have transformed it into what it is today. So Steve, good morning and a very big welcome.
Good morning, Alison. Good morning, everybody.
I have warned Steve that we were really keen to know what was going through the head of that 16-year-old apprentice that on day one when he joined Morgan Motors.
Sorry, I was just saying I missed that bit.
That's all right. I was going to say, what was going through your head on day one when you rocked up?
Well, it was it's somewhat interesting because I think I've got to slide a little bit further on, but I might as well step into it. I came being fairly local, seeing the cars driving around as I was growing up, always wanting to be involved in cars or motorbikes, and my father dropped me off outside the door and asked me to go and put a suit on and go in and ask for an interview, which I duly did, and didn't get a job. And so three visits later, a further 2 visits, which were highly embarrassing when you're a 16-year-old, putting a suit on and being thrown through the door of literally just behind where I'm sat now. And on the 3rd attempt, I got offered a job. So it was embarrassing. And when I joined Morgan, as you said, steeped in history, and a very traditional, albeit very small car factory of the day. So it was challenging. Honestly didn't think I'd be sat here today talking to yourselves and talking to people as the chairman and CEO.
An incredible story. And Steve, I'm going to hand the slides over to you and give you stage. You're our star act today, and we're all really looking forward to hearing from you.
Right, so just share screen. Has everybody got the screen?
We can see that really well. Just before Steve starts, guys, but we're going to be curating questions in the chat. So if you've got a question that crops up as Steve is talking, pop it in the chat. We'll keep an eye on all of them. And we've got a really nice chunk of time afterwards to chat to Steve and ask him those questions. So over to you, Steve.
Thank you very much, Ali, and good morning and welcome everybody. Thank you for inviting me to speak with everybody today. And looking at the list of attendees, there's a great diverse range of industries, and I've done a bit of research and looked at everybody. Knew quite a lot of your businesses, and a few I didn't know and had a look at. So good morning. Yeah, so I'm going to try and keep an eye on time because I've ended up with 50 slides to go through, so I'll try and keep it relevant. I think first of all, Alice kindly introduced Morgan and did a little bit of EV poll to see who knows a bit about Morgan. Great to see some of the words that you've used coming up because they would be very relevant to us. There's a few words I didn't see, which I tend to hear as we go around globally, or as I travel around, whether it's dealers or events or shows. You hear a lot about John Harvey Jones and wooden chassis and things like that. So the John Harvey Jones story, I'll just quickly touch on that, is really interesting. In 1990, as the chairman of ICI, did his Troubleshooter series. I'm not sure if any of you remember or have seen that. It was, when I think back into 1990, and he revisited 10 years later as quite a frail old gentleman 10 years later. But when I think back to 1990 and that program on, I think, 4 channels on TV, and I think what happened after that from a marketing and reach perspective, you know, I'm sure with your businesses you spend significant sums of money, and I've got 2 of our marketing guys in the room with me now, our head of marketing as well. So when I think today about what we need to spend to get the reach and to get the traction that program got, especially with the lack of social and digital presence that we have today, it's quite fascinating, really. So that was interesting. As I'm sure most of you know, we're making sports cars. And I'll talk a little bit later about the experiential side of our business as well, because I always talk, and we talk internally, and we're starting to message more externally about the fact that actually we're very much firmly placed in the leisure industry. We just happen to make a car. So we're really working hard on the experiential side of the business and what we're doing. I think one of our challenges has been and continues to be to a degree, we can be seen as a little company that makes, you know, quintessentially British sports cars at the foot of the Malvern Hills here in Worcestershire. But actually the lengths we have to go to push for innovation and strive for innovation, because when you make a motor car today, the legislation, the requirements, both legally and morally, are incredibly tough and hugely expensive. And what I've witnessed over the last sort of 20 years, if I think back, almost, if you take it in 5-year chunks, the cost association, it goes up, you know, hundreds and hundreds of times rather than going with sort of inflation. It's just the way the industry's gone, and I think we're witnessing more change in the industry and have done in the last 5 years than we've seen in decades. So that's interesting. So we're very rooted in innovation. We've had to be, and we've done a lot of work, and I'll talk as we go on. So I'll talk about how Morgan has tried to adopt and the latest technology, both in our vehicles and throughout the business as well, because I think for myself, coming through as an apprentice, and what we do with apprentices today, I think that's important, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through. So moving swiftly on, he says, and we don't seem to be, why is that not moving?
First slide often gets stuck, Steve.
Yeah.
We always have that problem too.
Right, we're away.
Yay.
So, yeah, so that's the first bit of innovation and technology that always fails to work first time out. So just briefly, the agenda, the topics that I'd like to talk to everybody about today would be the history of the company, the craft elements of what we do, the innovation and the milestones, challenges, and Ali talked about challenges and opportunities. I think in every challenge there's an opportunity, and I'm sure some of you may have seen that obviously we took investment back in 2019. So a little bit about that journey from the family-owned business, and if you'd have asked me as recently as the beginning of or late 2018, would I ever be a shareholder in Morgan? Would the family ever take investment? I wouldn't have thought that would have happened as recently as that. However, that it's been an incredible journey. It's been really interesting, a massive learning curve, and our CFO and myself had to do all of the due diligence because there was no family in the business at that time. So I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through, and really then onto the future of Morgan, which I think is really important. So, you know, we create history, but every day I always say internally to the team here at Morgan, today's activity is tomorrow's history. So everything we're doing is leading into future history. A little bit of a slide, change of words on this earlier because it feels slightly indulgent, but I know Ali wanted to talk about that. I just briefly talked about when I joined the company in 1983, somewhat greyer today and slightly larger than I was in 1983. But yeah, so my journey with Morgan started in 83, as I said, with my father bringing me to the factory, and embarrassingly, you know, on the third occasion, I really didn't want to walk through that door and ask for a job for the third time. But he was a big guy and insistent that I did that, so I did it and got offered a job. Joined as an apprentice in the sheet metal department, and then for the following 5 years, I studied at Matthew Bolton Technical College in Birmingham. Which was a 4-year course, which was a City and Guilds course back in the day, and then I stayed on to do what was called a licensure, which was very much the first look into a sort of the management side of some of the business. And a little later, I'd like to talk a little bit more about where I and Morgan, where we see apprenticeships today, because I think if I think back to my apprenticeship, it was very, very craft based and skill based. Today we try and work with our apprentices and our graduates and people training about the wider business discipline. So I think there's a real piece there, and something that I've talked to a lot of universities and educational institutions about, linking the wider business elements, because yes, you could be the best craftsperson in the world, but if you don't understand the cost accounting side and certain bits of that, it doesn't stand you in good stead to take your career or the business forward. So did my apprenticeship, did a licensure, and then Morgan was very much a business steeped in tradition. The oldest person in the department, the business was very much departmentally run, and it was controlled by each department. So you'd have your chassis shop, your wood department, what we call the body shop, the sheet metal department, the paint shop, the trim shop, the machine shop, and the oldest person tended to step up into the role. And I saw an opportunity with my foreman at the time, as we used to call them, foreman. He had to go off and have a hip replacement, and I sort of stepped in. I think I just put myself forward, I guess, and stepped into that role and did that job for then finally got promoted into that role officially, maybe a year or so later. Carried that role out, saw an opportunity to change the way the business was running with regards to, we were piecework, so it was very interesting. So for those of you, well, for all of you in manufacturing, you'll know, you know, you can have a pull or a push system in manufacturing, and we were very much a push system, so it was piecework. So you quite often ended up with a lot of componentry and a lot of things that you didn't need, and the things you did need you didn't have, and it was very much based around what the people earned. And you know, I look back at that picture on the left there and think, you know, if you used to panel the bodies, it wasn't such a great job as if you were making some of the smaller components financially for you as an individual. So between Sarah, who sits next door to me now, actually in HR, and Sarah started as an apprentice as well. Between us, we sort of worked quite hard on changing that piecework system into a standard operating procedure and standard time system, and moving away from piecework. So moving much more towards a sort of a Kanban pull system rather than a push system. So did that role for a number of years, and then what was nice, I guess, was the recognition, and got offered the opportunity to apply for a manufacturing manager role, which was also externally advertised, and I was successful in that appointment. From that manufacturing manager role, after a few years, moved into operations director, then on to managing director in 2013, and then latterly in 2019 CEO, chairman and CEO. So that was a sort of my journey through Morgan. I think what I'd like to talk about a little bit more about today is a lot of things have never changed, but have changed, sorry, but what hasn't changed is Morgan's agility and desire to innovate and bring things forward. And as I said earlier, with making a motor vehicle, as I know, looking down the list of all of your industries, the requirement for legislation and you know, the full round business requirements now is huge. So you know, like all of your businesses, you know, we've got a lot of challenge in those areas. So we've got to be agile, we've got to innovate, but it's actually how we maintain some of that core craftsmanship, but marry it to the innovation as well. So very topical for today. Just a little bit about the history of Morgan and understand how it's evolved, how it continues to do so today, and to appreciate where the company's come from. So in 1909, HFS Morgan, Henry Frederick Stanley Morgan, affectionately known as HFS, designed and invented the Morgan Runabout. So the car you see today is the founding, starting of the company, the three-wheeler, and we'll talk as we go through today about the three-wheelers 100 years later has come back to the forefront for Morgan. So what you see there is Henry Morgan with his three-wheeler, tiller steering. What's really interesting and significant about this motoring back in 1909, it was very much focused around the wealthiest in society, and HFS's invention sought to bring that to more affordable and then create, you know, give opportunity to a wider audience. So I think that, you know, that was really interesting piece of the history, and actually again there was a lot of even back in the day there were challenges with taxation and vehicles. So 1909 was the start of the company, and where Henry Frederick Stanley Morgan started the company. I think what came very quickly after the founding of the company was how that it could evolve. And when I think back to there are so many variations of the theme of three-wheeler, and it was really interesting. And when I think about evolution and about business practices back in the day, even then, sort of in the 20s, HFS did a licensing deal with a company called Darmont, the Darmont brothers in France, and we were building three-wheelers in France. And when you think back then, to try and to achieve that today is fairly straightforward if you have a brand and a product. Well, not straightforward, but the opportunities are there, and it's from a communicative point of view, it's fairly easy with the digital presence in the world and the transport and things. Going back then, one can only begin to try and imagine how difficult that would have been from the distance and the time and everything. So yeah, very, very interesting. The other side of this story was Henry Morgan soon realised about the sporting element of the motor vehicle and what that could do, and the competition side of things, and I think back then and look to today, and just thinking of, I made a few notes of some of the things. So what you see there in the advert on the left is how a 6-day trial and only one Morgan was entered and one Morgan finished, and that's been a theme for Morgan throughout 112 years of our existence. You know, Brooklyn speed records, trial and endurance events. Very famously for Morgan, 1962, we entered Le Mans and won our class in the 2 litre +4, in a 2 litre class with a +4. That was that's been widely spoken about within Morgan for the last coming up 60 years. So 60 years later, we're talking about that, but actually we re-entered Le Mans in 2002 and 2004 with an Aero 8, DeWalt sponsored vehicle, and both privateers, but factory backed, which was really interesting and a great part of our history. Latterly, in the 2009 GT Championship, we were running second, and it was very much a David and Goliath story. It was the first year Audi had brought the R8 out, and so moving forward into history, throughout our history, HFS Morgan at the very outset of the company recognised that the sporting element and the competition side of motoring was going to be a good marketing tool and a great way of showcasing your products as we move forward. So I think that was an interesting few decades for the company. So again, a few images of some three-wheelers. It's the icon that the company was founded in 1909. It was a brilliant but simple design. A number of different powertrain or engine suppliers back in the day. So we had Jap, we had Blackburn, there was Ford. There's lots of different engines that Henry Frederick Stanley was using. And again, quite interesting when I think today about how difficult it is to do these things. Back then, there would have been obviously a lot more simplicity in the design, but still a challenge. So I think high performance on the track soon reached the attentions of the affluent, and Morgan became fashionable. And actually, we made a lot of three-wheelers back in the day. We were quite a large producer, large vehicle producer. So really humble beginnings, but actually gained quite a bit of traction quite soon. Stepping forward into 1936, the first four-wheeled Morgan was designed. Again, there was a real movement towards family motoring, and time had moved on. So 1936 saw what's become known as the 4.4. The 4.4 is the world's longest running series production car in history. Why 4.4? 4 wheels, 4 cylinders. It was simple at the time, but it worked. The car you see there had a Z section full width chassis with an ash frame, coach built frame, panelled in steel. The car was still lightweight and required to be a competitive sports car, but it, again, throughout the decades, a lot of evolution with the 4.4. However, in 1968 came the next real sea change for Morgan. It was the launch of the +8. So the +8, again, another icon in our sort of stable of vehicles. 1968 launch with the Rover V8, which was a part of the Buick. It was born from the Buick, but a very, very, very powerful lightweight car. And actually, it was seen as a Jaguar E-Type competitor for its lightweight power to weight ratio. And I think the one thing that's remained constant throughout Morgan's history is the quest to make a lightweight sports car that gives you good power to weight, and today that's become ever more important with emissions and taxation, and we'll talk a little bit more. So I think the +8 ran from 1968 to 2006. slightly confusing because it did actually go on after that, but in a different guise, and I'll show you some imagery how that run. Again, an extremely competitive model in the racetrack and competition environment. So really popular for Morgan and a great car. So stepping forward, there you see 2+8. You see actually the first +8, 1968 in the background, and you see the latest +8, which finished production now, but up until 2018 remained in production. So very much the aesthetic and the down the road, what we call the down the road view of the vehicle, very similar. The cars still evoke the same nostalgia and joys of driving, but actually very much more modern. So what you see is a fully aluminium bodied vehicle with an aluminium bonded chassis that I'll talk about as we go. And again, for Morgan, one of our key challenges is we all get in a car today, and one of the things that we always consider is it doesn't matter what car you get in today. It could be a £15,000 run-of-the-mill car. They have the very latest technology. For ourselves, we've always talked about relevant technology. What makes it relevant? And Morgan is an analog car in a lot of ways, but it's actually what people, it's part of what people buy into in a very modern world. So they're buying into some analog features, but actually it's got the relevant technology that you want from a sports car, that you want from your leisure vehicle. So that's been a really interesting journey for us as well. We talk about Morgan providing an antidote to overly sanitized motoring. Again, it's all about, for us, the blend of craftsmanship and technology and how we marry those two things together. We have to comply with all of the latest legislation, vehicle legislation and challenges, but marrying keeping the craft element of what we do and marrying that together. And I quite often talk about we can go to a complete white room lab environment, or you can go to a museum. What we try and achieve here is marrying those two disciplines together and ensuring we get an up-to-date vehicle, but we're offering a USP within the industry that we operate in. Conscious of time. So Morgan, as you can see from this slide, the Aero 8 and Morgan for the new millennium, I think it's really important. You know, we've continued to evolve throughout the 20th century, but actually fiercely committed to our founding principles and what stands us in good stead. During the 90s, there was a real movement towards vehicle safety, and I'm not sure how many of you can remember or have seen. And funny enough, I saw an advert last night for Volvo actually, and Volvo are moving from what was their pure safety advertising campaigns in the sort of late 80s and 90s, and I looked at their latest advertising campaign last night actually, where they're dropping a Volvo out and they're watching some glaciers fall, and it's all about EV technology today, and they're talking about the safety. It's the safety of the planet now, and not the crashworthiness necessarily. So I think for ourselves, we learnt a lot in the 90s and invested heavily into the business and the next generation of vehicles. We recognised that legislation was changing rapidly. If we wanted to stay and remain relevant and be able to make a vehicle, we'd have to get on that treadmill. And we invested heavily in vehicle safety. And it's really interesting because what we learned was when you used to see the adverts on TV with the car going on the sled and crashing into a wall and the dummy coming through. In the early days, it was very much about making things as rigid and as absolutely rock solid as you could. The learning soon came that actually it's all about zoning the vehicle and keeping crash zones within the vehicle, so you get energy absorption throughout a crash. Because if you run into a wall, yourself as a human being, if you just run into a wall, the wall's not going to move and you're just going to be in bits. Actually, if you can absorb the energy as you run into it, you know, there's more chance of success. So we put a lot of effort into that, and I think once we'd done that led to the next sea change, which was the Aero 8 and a more for the new millennium. And I think this is where we really featured a lot more. We went to the next phase of Morgan development then. So we spent 2 years on the racetrack, understanding, moving from a Z-frame steel ladder frame chassis through to a bonded riveted aluminium monocoque structure, including the very latest BMW powertrain and a thing called Superform aluminium wings. And I shouldn't say, maybe some of you do know Superform, but I'll talk about that later, because that's a really fascinating piece of technology that we adopted in 1997. Was the first time we worked with Superform. So I've got some slides on that as we move along. So the Aero 8 for Morgan, massive milestone, adopted a lot of technology, merged, was a perfect marriage of the craft and technology, and it took us even further into that marriage and allowed us to talk more confidently about that marriage of craft and technology, because we're now using the very latest bonded riveted structure chassis. And when we went to Geneva in 2000, ourselves and Aston Martin were the two vehicles there with this bonded riveted structure. And then we were there with the Superform technology as well. So it was fantastic. Underpinned, very expensive, but actually we really look to, when we do vehicle development, we're typically not like a lot of car companies. So totally admire what they do, but use McLaren for an example. Beautiful car, technically, the technical prowess is fantastic. The model evolution and change is at a pace that is very, very difficult to fund. You're talking vehicle programs of hundreds of millions of pounds. So if you take that number and then think about how many vehicles you're making, and the amortization of that development program across. So actually for Morgan, we very much launch a new model. We try and look as far down the road as we can and develop that model from the ground up, and then keep evolving it. So we try and take a leap into the technology that we know that we can evolve as we move along. So I think just looking at the car you're looking at there, that's an Aero GT, actually one of only 8 that we made to finish the run of cars in 2018. In fact, that exact car is actually at the factory here today, and actually up for sale. So if anybody would like to buy that car, that's here for sale. When I think about that, and I think about this fusion of craft technology, blending the latest innovation, and getting it within your business, I look at that and I think about the work we have to do with BMW globally. So for us to be able to work with BMW, put that engine in the car, sell that car to yourselves as customers, we have to go to Miramax testing for hot weather, climate testing, emissions, drivability, functionality. We have to go to Granada for altitude. We have to do a lot of global testing to ensure that the product is fit for purpose, because the collaboration, I'll talk about collaborations, the collaboration with BMW is fantastic, but they're not going to risk their brand name unless they're 100% confident that we've done our due diligence and they've backed that up and they're satisfied. So a lot of work to be done before you can get these cars to market. The Morgan three-wheeler, I started with the three-wheeler, and you move 100 years on, and we relaunched the three-wheeler in 2011. And I've written down, just give an overview of how and why. Really interesting journey. So almost out of the blue, I find a chap in Seattle is almost copying a replica Morgan, but it's actually getting quite a bit of acclaim. Privateer, just doing 1 or 2 vehicles using a Harley-Davidson engine, very much non-compliant from a manufacturer's point of view, but from a privateer's point of view, he's made a vehicle. It was a little bit of a Remington moment where, I don't know if you remember the advertising, I like the company so much we bought it. I went to Seattle to see this guy, just to try and understand what he'd done, not in an aggressive way because we were really interested, and ended up didn't need to do what we did, but I wanted. He'd done quite a lot of work in the background, so we bought that kind of. It's quite interesting actually from a funding perspective. We have a thing called the Niche Vehicle Network, which is a funding body for niche manufacturers, and we got a little bit of support to do a teardown project and a supply chain project on this vehicle, and we very rapidly become super excited about the opportunity of relighting this fire that started the company 100 years previously. So in 2011 we launched at Geneva. Huge interest. It was at the outset of the global EV race, so a lot of manufacturers were just stepping forward with the EV. It was massively disruptive. It created an element of surprise in the industry. It was analog. It was squarely focused on the driving experience, an experiential thing. That there was a lot of visceral elements about the three-wheeler. It's got a thumping 2-litre V-twin on the front of it that sort of was, you know, massively exciting to drive. So, however, we had to ensure the vehicle was fit for purpose. It was stable. It passed all of the regulations. So we set out on an 18-month project for the three-wheeler. And a decade later, 3,000 vehicles later, we're just witnessing in the factory in front of me now, the last 33 cars going through, which are affectionately known as P101s, because when I went to Seattle in 2009, we named the project P101. So we've just put the last 33 cars through the factory as P101s, as a very special limited edition with a lot of the elements of what we initially set out to do. So that's become a real core product pillar for Morgan, and really exciting, an exciting product. And I'll talk later about what's next. So I think regardless of the product pillars for Morgan, every car is essentially coach built. We're powered by BMW or Ford today, predominantly BMW actually at the moment. 3 core materials that form the Morgan cars. So you have wood, aluminium and leather. I think wood is the wood side of the vehicle is really interesting. We take a lot of factory visits, and every day when there's factory visits, I can be in the factory and you see people step down into the wood shop and you can almost see them lift their head and take a deep in-breath, and it's just that feeling of wood. Everybody can relate to a little bit of woodwork and wood, so fascinating. It's ash, it's sourced from Lincolnshire. It's wherever possible UK sourced and grown. On the odd occasion in history we've had to go slightly further afield, but we've worked with the same supplier for 25 years, probably a little bit more. Leather, we use a lightweight grade of leather, quite often used in aviation. It's really interesting. So it comes from Scottish Leather Group. Their sustainable credentials are fantastic, and it's becoming, I'll talk about sustainability a little later, but it's becoming really a real focus for all businesses now, the sustainable element of what we do. And I think you've just got to be able to back that up, especially with materials such as leather. So very good sustainable credentials. And aluminium, although hard to trace the source at times, again, a lightweight material. We're producing a lightweight car with end-to-end life. All four-wheeled Morgans are still on the road. You'll never, if you could open the doors of a barn somewhere in Cornwall and see a pile of bits on the floor, that will be turned, if you, even if you don't do it yourself, if you rang up a Morgan dealer, that would be purchased and turned back into a car. So generally everybody treasures their Morgans and keeps them, and they stay on the road. Every vehicle's bespoke and built to the customer's exacting specifications. Obviously, in the word cloud earlier, I think craftsmanship come up, and it's a word that we often use. I always like to try and use it with innovation and technology as well. We invite customers to the factory to come and see their cars. So we'll talk a little bit. I've got some slides on the Visitor Experience Centre. So we have 30,000 visitors visit the factory each year. We can be extremely flexible for you for anybody as a customer. So, you know, we welcome people to come and see their cars and become part of that process. And interestingly enough, I took a call not so many months ago from I won't say his name, but I'm sure you'll guess, one of the three chaps that do Top Gear or the Grand Tour now, who was filming in VW in Wolfsburg, and called me up and said, Steve, I've just made my mind up for my 50th birthday present. I need a new Morgan Plus 6. I'm here seeing a technical prowess at its very, very best, and it's stunning, but it feels a little bit soulless, and I just really want I want something that I can enjoy and be part of. So that was an interesting conversation to have, and you know, I've just written a little note about our factory being fueled a little bit by Weetabix. So as you come around the factory, you know, there's no big heavy or obviously there is some machinery, but it's very much a people element, and we sort of run a low energy manufacturing plant, which is really good as well for the environmental credentials that we hold out. Just talking a little bit about craftsmanship, we don't just create a car using undue amounts of craftsmanship because it's symbolic. It is genuinely a good way for us to produce the car. Talked about crash structures. Wood as a material absorbs energy. So as we've done all of our crates, it's quite interesting, because when typically people think, oh, you're building a wooden car, how can that be safe? When you see some of the crash videos and some of the analysis that we do, and we've got the very latest software doing all of this analysis, it's fascinating to see just how the car performs in crash. It is important. It does give us a USP. It does differentiate us within the automotive sector. I can't think of another car using wood in mainstream production and building the car the way we do. So it does give us that. We also welcome, typically pre-pandemic, 30,000 visitors to come and do factory tours. We have a fleet of hire cars that people come and hire every day. So people come into the factory. I come back to that leisure statement. We build a car, but we're in the leisure industry. And I think people, when we move outside of our daily lives, our working environment, you go into what you want to do and what satisfies and indulges you as an individual, or us as individuals. So craftsmanship works like that. And I'd just like to share a few images regarding that and just explain to you a little bit about what we do here. So you can see 1960, a gentleman there dropping an engine into a chassis, and you can see in 2020 the same activity happening. I think, again, although the way we put the car together is quite similar, the technology adopted is fascinating. I think about three-wheelers. If you saw a three-wheeler being built, you've got this sort of three-wheeler that harks back into the 20s and 30s, and then you'll see a guy with a laptop with the latest emissions controls and setting up for the drive cycle. So you see all of these things. So similar to the way we put it together, but materials wise very different. 1960s, a guy making an ash frame, and today a guy making an ash frame there. Again, materials, jigs and fixtures, machining capability, the way we scan and the way we control quality, very different, but the materials are the same. So just an example of the evolution, encompassing a bit of technology, but using very similar materials. The other element of our core skill base, trimming and leather hooding. Again, we buy laser cut kits in today. So whereas you typically buy hides of leather in, and as we would have done with the ash, we buy trees cut into planks. Today you buy billets, you buy laser cut, you buy nested components, so you're getting the very best of the yield of what you're trying to achieve. So as I know, looking down the list of attendees, all of our businesses suffer from the same challenges, don't we? Bill of materials and manufacturing costs. So it's really key for us, ever so in the car industry, because everybody wants more for less and people want deals, and so you've got to be as efficient as you can. So again, same sort of principles, but very different in the way we put them together. So the next generation, a lot of people ask me about how we actively ensure our skills remain within the next generation. Myself, our HR manager, started as apprentices, and feel it's incredibly important for not only Morgan, but I think, you know, for the wider audience. I think keeping a skill set, keeping the ability to do these things. So we'd have somewhere between 12 and 15 apprentices across all of the disciplines of the business. In time gone by, it would have been very much focused on the core skills, sheet metal, wood and upholstery. Today, you can see Emily in the centre at the top there. Emily is a graphic designer. Our head of design joined us on an internship from university. So we've got those requirements for skills are very much spreading across the business now, and we work with several local education establishments, and Wolverhampton University, their students and grads run our race team. So we run a race team, the Morgan Challenge. They run the 2 vehicles in that. We also work with Bicester Heritage. For those of you who probably haven't heard or don't know about Bicester Heritage, fantastic setup there, and it will be the go-to place for niche, anything automotive and niche going forward. So they've got a skills academy we run there, and I think it's super important for us to equip, I won't say youngsters, because we've got some mature trainees as well, but it's incredibly important for us to equip these people to take the business to the next level and to take over from us as we move on. And I think I talked earlier a little bit about the wider elements, and really keen to get our trainees to understand more about the cost accounting, more about the health and safety, the sustainability, the legislative requirements to run a business. That's super important, because the best craftsperson in the world, if they think they've got forever to make something, it doesn't stand you in good stead going forward. So really important to retain such skills. Just moving forward, a quick snapshot of Morgan today. I'd like to share with you where we are today and what we're doing today. So typically, coming through the factory in Malvern here, we've, over the last 20 years, we've year on year pretty much increased our sales. And we talk about 800 cars, it's somewhere between 800 and 1,000 cars. Our best year by volume by vehicle was 2012. 1,179 cars through this facility. People quite often ask me, what is volume? What is the capacity of Morgan? Because of a robust, long-standing supply chain, we can be agile using the supply chain. And quite often, when I think about the volume of 3-wheelers, as we really ramp the 3-wheeler up, I use the supply chain a lot more to help us in that quest to create some volume. So that was our best year. Typically 800 to 1,000 cars. This year we're targeting 900 cars. Obviously it's a tough year for us. You know, we've had a few weeks out and a few little challenges, as I know everybody will have had. But every Morgan ever made has rolled down the factory here in Malvern, It's hard to tell by the picture of the site, but actually we're on a hill. And it took us it took us a long time to understand that gravity is a great tool when the car doesn't run, and you use the hill to so, you know, we did this ball of string exercise back in the 90s about where a car moved to and from, and it's fascinating. It's fascinating what's so close to you that you see every day, and then all of a sudden you think, no, I've got to address this. So we currently export around 70% of our production to Europe, America, and a number of rest of the world countries. We're looking at emerging markets. People talk about China. Everybody, the first region and market that comes to people's mind in the industry is, oh, China must be a huge market. It's extremely legislative. It's also culturally challenging with an open-top sports car because of the culture. Interesting enough, it's slightly moving. There was a time sort of 10 years ago where the wealthiest wanted the driver to be sat further away from the driver. Today, you are seeing more requirement. And I was talking to the chief executive of Rolls-Royce last week, who was here at the factory. They're doing a lot of business in China now with where people are driving their own cars now. They're going to their country houses. The wealthiest are going to their country houses. Years ago, it would have been very much, I want to sit as far away from the driver. So there are opportunities, but it is challenging. I think homologation is an issue. Legislation around the world, every market's different. Almost every market has a different requirement. And I think to Europe's hugely challenged on taxation on emissions. So you can soon increase the price of a vehicle by multiple tens of thousands of euros on an emission break. So if you breach an emission number, that is really challenging. Experiential is a massive market for us, huge. It probably the biggest opportunity for us for growth is experiential. So we currently have 11 hire cars that are out every single day of the week. It's this year it'll be close on £400,000 worth of revenue for us for daily hires of vehicles. We do tours, so you can hire a Morgan, and we do a Cotswold tour. We must think about a Cornwall one, actually, a Cornish, Devon and Cornwall one, but we do a Cotswold tour and we do a Lakes tour. Really popular. So that's really interesting. You know, turnover for Morgan, we're moving into the 40s and it's growing year on year. We had a moment a few years ago where we really sat down as a business and looked at, it's very easy to get tied up in volume of vehicles and lose sight of profitability. In the automotive industry, everybody talks about, oh, this manufacturer made 5,000 vehicles, this manufacturer made 7. Actually, it's about making money on the vehicles, not the number you make. So that was interesting. I'm very conscious of time. Ali, am I okay for time?
Steve, you're fine.
Okay. Just moving on to where we are and a bit of the evolution of Morgan. You can see although we're 112 years as a company, we moved to this site in 1914. We're still on this same site. I'm sat from the image on the left and the open door. I'm sat about 20 yards away from that door. HFS Morgan, the more successful he became, the more he added on and built another shed onto the factory. And today, would you build a car factory on a slope? No, you wouldn't. But we've made it work, and it works very well for us now. You can see in the 2010s over onto the sort of top center of that picture is our experience center. Today, we've just last year we just finished a complete bespoke rebuild of that centre to welcome the 30,000 visitors, paying visitors that come and do factory tours. Again, a big part of that experience. I talked a little bit about John Harvey Jones, so I won't talk about that. But he did say a few interesting things that were quite pointed for the Morgan family. in that visit in 2009, and it was a very, very mixed reaction. So you had a guy that was at the pinnacle of his career, heading up, you know, a massive company, coming into Morgan and saying, you've got to change this, you've got to change that, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. And the family were very split. They were very split over it. I look back at today, I watched it again 6 months ago, and I found it fascinating, because I think there were things that were said that I think didn't fit what we did, but there were a lot of things that were said that did fit and did make sense. So I think you know, that was an interesting chapter in the history of Morgan. Today we sell in over 30 countries, and that's growing. We have a global dealer network of over 60 dealers. I think it's 62 as we sit here today. That's growing again. Latest dealers: Vietnam, Bahrain, Singapore. So you know, we are spreading our wings globally. The US is a massive opportunity for us, but if any of you can drop over and see Mr. Biden while he's in Cornwall, it would be really helpful to talk to him, because the way they legislate and some of the rules, whoever sits and writes them is just, it's just incomprehensible at how they can write some of the things they write in. But it's for all of our businesses, we have legislation you look at and you think doesn't make sense, but it is what it is. But huge market for us. Only last night I received an email from one of the labs we work with in America to say that we've just got a green light on a niche, a very high-end special project that we're doing to be sold in America. So the three-wheeler is interesting because that flies under the radar from a lot of car legislation. So very much a product that's relevant for the States. Talked about the number of cars we make, over 70% exported. Largest single market in the world is obviously the UK. That's followed by Germany, France. The Netherlands is interesting market for us. Taxation's very high, but they do like their cars, and they do get a bit of cross-border work as well from the Netherlands. Japan was rapidly becoming number 2 a few years ago. I think we all see what's going on in Japan at the moment, albeit all barring the Olympics. I think they're somewhat behind with the COVID situation. I think there's a few challenges there. So we've seen a little bit of shrinkage, but it'll come back. And Indonesia is becoming very popular for us as well. So that is really interesting market segments and where we are. We talked about the dealers. You can see from this slide, well, on the top right actually is our new visitor centre and showrooms. On the dealers, what's really interesting is the Morgan owned brand centres. It's, if I was setting the business up today, would I set it up in exactly the same way? I honestly don't think I would from a distribution point of view. It can become very difficult to manage at times, and I think what we're finding is Morgan brand centres are really popular. I honestly think people will travel to buy a car of the sort of emotional discretionary purchase. People will travel. I think what people don't accept, what customers don't accept, is any hassle for service and aftercare. I think you've got to set yourself up that if you're in Cornwall and a middle light, an engine light comes on your car, you need to be able to pick the phone up and know that somebody's coming to you. You've not got to worry about how you get it to the location. So we're finding we're just doing a big building project in Kensington in London, where we're opening our own brand dealership and brand centre. We have Malvern. I think if I was talking to you in 2 years' time, I think we'll be talking about brand centres in Milan, New York, LA, and some major cities, in Tokyo, major cities around the world. That's what I'd love to get to. It's obviously a very costly exercise. So we've got to, I've got investors saying to me, prove you can make it work in your own locations, and we'll stretch our wings from there. So yeah, everything's managed from the factory. So we have one of the things is nice, we have the full suite of activity here at the factory, right the way through from concept sketch design, right the way through to sales and marketing, and all of the admin facilities is on one site here in Malvern. Morgan, the family, we quite often talk about the Morgan family, and we really, back in the 50s and 60s and 70s, it would have been the Morgan family being HFS Peter and the Morgan family. Today, it's very much about the wider family and about the stakeholders. So we often talk about the wider family being our employees, our customers, our dealers, and fans that touch the brand somewhere along the line. We have 220 members of staff. Just to give you a flavour of that, it's about a 50-50 split, which again, for all of your businesses, I'd be really interested to hear how you manage. I've witnessed when I joined Morgan, Peter Morgan was sat right where I'm sat now at this minute. He had I could certainly count on two hands how many supporting, what I call the indirect employees he had supporting the business. Today, it's just that 50-50 split between legislation, marketing, sales, design, brand. It's become a 50-50 split, which sometimes I question the way the scales are tipped, especially coming from a manufacturing background myself. I really look at it and think, I just want people making cars, but it can't be that way. 12 to 15 apprentices we've talked about, numerous third generation employees, and the longest serving Morgan employee is 57 years. Typically you 20 years and above is people tend to come join Morgan. Sarah, who's sat in the office next to me, we quite often talk about the glue that holds you together, but you've also got to be very mindful of the complacency and like any relationship, you have to keep the boundaries and make sure everything's working the way it is. But yeah, really proud of the service and where we are with that side of it. I just made a note about mentioning Morgan Tour Guides. On the top left there, you see a tour guide. We have 22 tour guides, I think, at the moment. One of the caveats for tour guide, we very, very gently this last year just moved away from it, but up until last year, it was that you had to be a Morgan owner to be a tour guide. We've got one or two now that aren't, but they are super passionate about the brand. They're real evangelists for the brand, and if any of you get a minute, just have a look on TripAdvisor and things like that for the tours we do and the feedback we get. Really proud of that, and it is incredibly difficult when you welcome in 30,000 members of the public that you typically you're worried about making sure you put everything right. We get some brilliant feedback, so super grateful for that. Just the product range, we'll talk very quickly on the product range. Morgan three-wheeler, we relaunched in 2011 at Geneva with nearly 3,000 units produced to date. It was our largest, it was the highest volume, single vehicle volume that we were producing in 12 and 13. It really is about a driving pleasure. If I always say to everybody, I can't sit here and say to anybody in the room now, you need to own a Morgan, because you obviously don't need to own a Morgan. We have to try and make it so you want to own a Morgan, and I'm really passionate with the team here that you can't put any barriers. You cannot make any barriers. You cannot make it difficult for people to come and visit the factory, to hire a car, to go on a tour, to test drive a car, to buy a car. So work really hard on that. I wouldn't sit here and dare be arrogant to say we don't get it wrong at times, because we do, but it's a challenge that I have with everybody. I mentioned earlier, P101, last 33 vehicles going through the factory. So the brand walk-up of the three-wheeler, it entered production at 22,995. The last cars leaving the factory at somewhere between mid-50s to 60k. So we've walked the brand up there and made it really interesting. So that's the three-wheeler. Morgan Plus 4, model name started in 50, 44 was 36, this one was 50. We introduced the latest version you see on screen in 2020. That was a press shot taken in Spain, launched there. It's powered by a 4-cylinder 2-litre BMW turbocharged engine, produces 255 brake horsepower, comes in a manual or automatic gearbox. Again, back to the specification, it is whatever you want. Colors, trim, it's just whatever. You choose a color, you bring us anything that you want us to blend and match, and we'll make every endeavor to do everything we can. The interesting thing about the Plus 4 launch, just a quick anecdote, we were due to launch that in Geneva. We've done Geneva since '99, I think it was. Every year, never failed to be there. Due to launch in March the 4th, 2020. But we build our own motor show stand, so we use our skills here in our wood shop, and we manufacture, build the stand. I send our own team out to erect the stand. We do all of that. We dismantle the stand and we man the stand. So it's all Morgan employees. We don't subcontract that to any agencies. We do it all ourselves. I got a call on the Friday before the show was due to start. We guessed it was going to happen, but we couldn't take the risk of not building the stand just in case it did. But Geneva, the canton in Geneva, pulled the show the day 2 days before it was due to start. So I flew out our head of design and internal media guy. They met the transporter in Lyon that had the cars that was en route to Geneva. They unloaded the car. They drove the car to Geneva, to the hotel we stay at in Geneva. And on the morning of the show, they left Geneva filming it, and they did a road trip back to the UK, culminating in a launch outside my office here at the factory. So we had to turn a real negative into a positive, and we got some great industry feedback from other OEMs for doing that, and it went down really well. But it was somewhat fraught at the time to have to think about how we were going to do it, but made a good fist of it. Plus 6 was launched in 2019. It is without doubt the most dynamically capable Morgan ever, from power to weight. Everything about the car is just fantastic and phenomenal. It's powered by a 6-cylinder 3-litre BMW engine, so BMW are very modular in there. So they do a 1.5 3-cylinder, a 2-litre 4-cylinder, 3-litre 6-cylinder engine. So although that car looks the same, I think it had something like a 3% carryover from the outgoing Plus 8 model that looked, if I put the two on screen, you would look at them and think that they were very, very super similar cars, but actually it was only a 3% carryover of componentry. So that's been a revelation and is going well for Morgan. Quickly moving on to what we call the marriage and craft of the marriage of craft and technology. And I'd like to talk about how we do this and striking that balance of craft and technology, because I think that is the strap line for Morgan. It's what we sell ourselves on. It's the USP. It's what we talk about all of the time, and I think it's really important for us. So I think on screen here you see the Aeromax. So the Aero 8 we launched in 2000, and that took us, as I said earlier, into very much a modern vehicle. So monocoque bonded aluminium chassis, Superform wings. The Aero 8 launch saw 5 series of convertible car, but right in the midst of that, the car on screen is the Aero Max. This was launched. This was a concept. It was commissioned by a gentleman called Prince Eric Sturster, who bought Barings Bank, the Nick Leeson, and he ended up owning Barings Bank, which is now called Bank Baring Brothers Sturster Associates. He commissioned a vehicle with us, wanted a special project. We penned this car was penned, and it was the next sea change in our technology, in our leap of technology. It was the first real supercar that demonstrated absolute flexibility in what we do and how we do it. It is the world's first, still, and only ever completely, entirely Superform aluminium vehicle. So I'll talk about Superform in a minute when I get to the slide, but just looking at how we manufactured this car and what we had to do, you can see here we produce a skeleton, and then from that skeleton we hand formed and wheeled and manufactured. All of the panels were made completely by hand on the first car. Just caveat that the front wings you see were a carryover part in the main, and I'll come on to how they change, but all of the coupe, the body, the back end, the rear wings was all manufactured by hand, and we had to make this first car by hand to enable us to then go to the next phase of what we did, was scanning the vehicle in, and how we actually 3D scan this vehicle, and took it from a hand beaten and a hand formed and made vehicle through to the very latest 3D scanned Alias CATIA, V5 CATIA Alias software for surfacing. So you can scan and you can merge the surfaces, and I'm looking at some of your business, I'm sure you've got some of the software in your businesses, but it was fascinating because it was our first leap into that depth of technology and how we made that car. And I think although it was wonderfully romantic to hand make the first car and do what we did, and fascinating depth and breadth of skill, knowledge, and capability, but if we were going to produce 100 of these cars, it was just not commercially viable, and the repeatability, because we always have to consider things like crash damage, and if we were going to replace parts and do things on vehicles after these cars were going all in the world, we couldn't start thinking about trying to manage something that was completely hand built. So it was our first foray into the real depth of technology, and I guess growing up and building the car the way Rolls-Royce would, or the way BMW would. So although it's romantic, we had to find that we had to use the technology and embrace the technology to do that. So again, this marriage and merging of these principles was really important for us. There you see on screen. We made 100 Aeromaxes. It was a 1.6 million pound tooling budget for the vehicle, which was actually today incredibly cost effective from a tooling budget. But we, making 100 cars, had to really think how could we stretch that and make more. So we went from an Aeromax to what we call the Super Sport. So this was the Targa version of that vehicle, and again, walked the brand up, took us into a different territory. First Targa top vehicle we made, a lot of learning gone on, but again, an entirely Superformed vehicle. So you can see from this shot how we really start to look at designing the car, using the software, using the technology. So when you're forming some of these panels, Superform would look at the reality of how you can get the draw, the stretch on these panels, and this Superform process is fascinating. The way it works, very much born from aerospace, and I've got a slide in a minute, and I'll talk to you how that worked. So looking at today's challenges, I think the automotive landscape, it really is rapidly changing. Social expectations of us as a manufacturer, of us as individuals, they're changing rapidly. Safety, vehicle safety has always been, well, certainly for us since the 90s, has been high on the list of what we do, not only from a compliance point of view, but from a moral standpoint as well. So we always try and go one step further than legislatively we have to. Performance is hugely important when you're building a sports car. I never cease to amaze you. You get in a +6 that's 0 to 60 in 4.1, well, actually 4 seconds, 170 miles an hour. And the first thing people want to do is take it and put it on a rolling road and try and get a few more brake horsepower and see what they can do with it. So that's interesting performance. Functionality, and probably most importantly now, sustainability. Ever-changing emissions and legislation, emissions targets are becoming real challenging, and I talked earlier about the Netherlands. On the outgoing +8, it was €60,000 first CO2 tax. So you buy the vehicle, you pay the in-country VAT, and then you pay €60,000 as an emissions tax. So it's a stealth. It's just a tax that you're paying. In my head, you'd absolutely really have to want to own a car to pay €60,000 or pounds just for CO2. So I think that was a challenge, which is why the vehicles you're looking at on screen, from right to left, top to bottom, we halved our emissions output by the latest powertrain technology, the latest drivability and emissions control systems. Always a balance with the performance, because the first thing that happens when you strangle and you want to withhold and reduce emissions is usually power. So we always look at lightweighting and how we can be better on that side of it. I think engineering and technology, tier 1 and 2 suppliers is becoming incredibly important for us as a manufacturer, and how we manage that. Especially we talk a little bit about EV and what happens in the EV arena. I think for Morgan, our position today, we've got greater brand awareness, but it's still really difficult when I talk about marketing, and I had investors in yesterday all day, and we talk about marketing. It's a real stretch, and we're really always pushing at the boundaries about what we can do better. I think the lines, that marketing piece, the lines between the traditional Morgan customer and the next generation of customer, and especially when I think about EV, those lines are getting more and more blurred. And I think it's really challenging for us to manage that situation, but it is a situation we have to manage. Just thinking of the CX generation platform chassis, I'm just trying to jump through a few slides. You can see, I talked earlier about the monocoque chassis. This is our bonded riveted chassis, turbocharged engines, back into that power to weight. Sits on Nash wood frame. Again, I talked about crash, but what we talk about in the automotive industry is NVH, noise vehicle harshness. Great for absorbing some of that detail. So all of the panels that adorn this, either Superform or hand fabricated aluminium panels. Just conscious time. Here you see a picture of our development team. This for Morgan over the last 20 years has gone from 3 people to where we are, and it's actually slightly larger than this now. I think what we really work hard on is having a specialist in each discipline, and in that picture there, far left, you've got our head of design, CAD engineers, electronics engineers, homologation for global approvals. We have mechanical engineering, project management, graphic design, brand, film and media. So in that development team, we try and wrap under one umbrella. But what's important for us is when we develop any car, whatever car it is, you'll have the styling design guys have a perfect blue sky with a perfect millimeter gap around panels, with a slip for a mirror, and they have all these perfect things. And then the homologation guy will look across the room and say, no, you can't do that. You've got to, this light's got to be this far off the center line, it's got to be this high off the floor. So having those disciplines within one facility really helps what we're doing. I quickly would like to talk about Superform aluminium. This is, I don't know if any of you are aware of the technology, but it's born from aerospace, very, very technical. And when I think about the sectors that Superform are in, we were the first series production automotive manufacturer in 1997 to work with Superform. The wing you see there is the wing we made. That was pushing the boundaries of their capabilities in 97. if you look back at the Aeromax from a few slides ago, that's an entire vehicle made from Superform. Just to give a flavour of what Superform do, and looking down the list, I'm sure there's a few people on the list of attendees that would benefit from a conversation with Superform. The architectural, aerospace, military and commercial, marine, obviously automotive, medical, so things like MRI scanners. Every MRI scanner that you go in that's made by Oxford Magnet, the end plates are all done by Superform. Rail, they do a lot of underground rail, so they do all the train fronts. Fascinating technology. Obviously has its limitations from volume perspective. It's not mass, it's not huge volume, but certainly, you know, you can get it up into the thousands of units. But the technology is fantastic. We started working with them in 1997, and just, well, perfectly positioned geographically. They're 8 miles away from the factory, and they've got a plant in Riverside, California as well. Today, automotive, Ferrari 812 Superfast rear deck, McLaren, most of the McLaren work, Aston Martin, Rolls-Royce, Panos, Spyker. They've done, you name it, on the sort of niche sector, they've done it. So a fascinating technology, and really allows us to talk with confidence about this marriage of craft and technology. So that's a really interesting piece of work we do. Just looking again, this marriage, what you see here is a robot scanner. So we're completely scanning a vehicle here that will allow us to go down to the depths of the vehicle to understand when we, you know, if we're putting trim panels in cars, or we're mounting cars, or we need to change things, you know, everything is on CAD. So all of our latest vehicles are entirely embedded within our CAD systems. Business supporting functions, MRP, ERP systems, you know, we run that. So everything we make is controlled through an ERP system, and I have to say, it's been a 4-year journey. And for those of you who have introduced any MRP and any new IT systems, at times incredibly painful. The journey only just starts when you get the first level of implementation done. It's the building of it thereafter. And I'm really pleased with, you know, we've got that, and the business is running using these systems now. All of our financial reporting is running using all of these systems. So that's been a fantastic journey. And again, another element of this embracing the technology, and embracing it not just to make the products, but just to support you in making of the products. Just a little bit about the environmental and social governance of what we're doing. I mean, you know, one of our challenges is to ensure that we make an environmentally friendly car, but I think it's not only the car, it's everything we do. And you know, in 2020 we've achieved sending zero waste to landfill. All of our VOC reporting, we're a member of the UN Global Compact. I'll be honest with you, a lot of this was driven from private equity and the investment. And I had a meeting yesterday actually we've got a sustainability committee that sits around this now. It started with myself and our chief operating officer. We've got a sort of a committee of 10 people, a little steering group, and we sort of carve up what's required within the business. So whether it's water usage, electricity usage, whether it's waste, whether you know, every bit of the planning of the business, and anything that touches environmental, sustainable, CSR, and all of that side of it, we work hard. It started off again a little bit like the computer system. It's challenging and it's difficult, but it pays dividends. And now we've got a team that engages, and some of the work we're doing in that arena has been really good. And just looking at this slide, thinking about you know, our corporate social responsibility, for the big night in at the beginning of the pandemic, we donated a car. Our investors come, it's quite an interesting story. The investors come to me and said, can you give us £100,000? Can you put £100,000 in the pot to do some? No, we're not we're turning over sort of low 40 millions. It's a challenging environment at times. Bill of materials cost is hugely important. So I'm not sitting here saying to everybody, oh, we've got lots and lots of money to throw. We haven't, but the investors, it was a big part of what they do for their governance and their corporate social responsibility. We didn't want to give £100,000. We wanted to do something different, and we just thought we'd had an incident a few years earlier where unfortunately a lad in the factory had broken his neck in an accident outside of work, and we donated. The factory give their time to build a car, and we give the components for a car, and raffled it and raised money for him. We wanted to do a similar thing, so we contacted the big Nightingale and Comic Relief, and they were blown away. We raised £1.39 million. It was the biggest. It was the biggest interaction they'd had with a vehicle and any single prize, and the government matched. It was a match response. So, we could quite proudly sort of put our heads up and say, that's what we've done. And interestingly, it was, and not for 1 minute was it staged anyway, but it was an NHS worker. He wasn't frontline. A guy from Scotland won the prize on the night. So do that. Charity partnerships. So we work with the Mission Motorsport, which is the veterans, the armed forces. We work with those guys. We've got a national and local charity that we work with. So a big part of what we do is in supporting local things. You can see part of our sustainability and corporate push was the two ladies in the bottom. Sarah's our HR manager and Sue works in the trim shop. They do litter picking and things like that. So we do a volunteering scheme as well for local initiatives. So a lot of work in that arena. Collaborations and partnerships. Just wanted to touch on this for Morgan. We're lucky that the brand, we've been around for 112 years, so we get a lot of calls for partnerships and collaborations. I think most importantly that there are a number of I think there are a number of ways you can approach a collaboration. It's either a commercial, it's a commercial effort, or you're looking for some brand. You're looking for a partner that's going to give you some brand reach and push. I think what we do is we always look for a clear and defined vision from the start, and what we're doing. So if I just take the few that we've got here, and shared values, really, that's a big one. So Pashley Cycles, they're British handmade, only in Stratford. They make all of the Royal Mail bikes. I just noticed they've done some electric ones for the Birmingham City Council. Materials, we're using similar materials, so a lot of shared values there. The Balvenie is whiskey, and they have huge reach, and this collaboration came about because in the US, one of their senior team had bought a second-hand Morgan to deliver whiskey to their events, and when they were getting to the events, there was so much interest in the Morgan. So over here, we entered into a collaboration, and they've done some fantastic work. Very craft-based, so really fantastic work. And then you've got the likes of BMW, which is a real strategic partnership, massive brand for us, but a lot of shared values in the heart of BMW and the family, the Quant family. So again, we're big in collaborations, and it's very easy to embark on a collaboration for the wrong reasons, and we try not to do that. So we try not to just it's not about a quick buck. We need to see down the road and what it means to us. A couple of other things that we have I talked about earlier, academic institutions, Wolverhampton University, big collaboration with those guys on their students running our race team, us having access to the latest technology and learning that they're picking up. And we run things like KTP, knowledge transfer partnerships. So big in collaboration piece as well. Moving on to a little bit of where we are today. And in 2019, we took investment. The picture you see is a mixture of Morgan family, and Andrea Bonomi with the orange tie. So Andrea Bonomi is Mr. Invest Industrial. When they took investment in us, they still owned Aston. They still had the majority share in Aston Martin. They just divested of Ducati. So it's been a really, really interesting journey. And a lot of people ask me how much has changed. I think if you asked our CFO a lot, the reporting has changed, the requirement to report has changed, the focus on what you're reporting on tax and profit and EBITDA and all of these good things is really changed a lot. But it's been the springboard for us to do some great things, and we've got a lot of good things in the on the table at the moment. The Morgan family still hold a minority share. We every employee has a share. The senior team have shares in the business. So it's it really culminates in for myself. It culminates in the journey from 1983, and I didn't think that I'd be sat here saying these things, but it's been really good. We, as an automotive manufacturer, vehicle programs have gone from massive amounts of money. So investment required to springboard to the next generation of products to do what we're doing. This really is the key for us going on to some greater things. And it's not without its challenges, it's not without its learning, but it's really interesting. So I'm really pleased with where we are today on that. And just to finish on, really a little bit about the future of Morgan and where we're going next. What does it mean to us? What is happening? I think the image you see here, let's start on the top right. That's the life car, the Morgan life car, 2009. That was our first foray into alternative propulsion systems, and that was a hydrogen fuel cell car, way, way, way before its time. If you're embarking on the project today, I think you obviously think that the cost base has moved on so much more. This was a project we did with Oxford University, Cranfield, BOC Lindy. Fascinating project, just way before its time, but it was our first leap into that. Subsequently, we've done bottom right is a plus E, so that was a full-wheeled, fully electric Morgan that we did as a demonstrator project. And then you see in the top left is the EV3. This was a project that we started with Selfridges, and it was called 1909. Selfridges were formed in 1909, the same as Morgan, founded, I should say, in 1909, same as Morgan. And we were going to build 19 cars with 9 British brand partners. Again, we did the demonstrator. We couldn't quite get across the line with the technology, but it's where we're going next. Every time we turn the TV on, every time we turn the radio on, you hear government or manufacturers talking about EV and alternative propulsion systems. It's coming at a rate. We're obviously on that treadmill. It's typically, I would suggest, I'm right in the midst of meetings now, it's probably a £50 million investment for us. So when you look at our turnover and you look at the investment required and you look at the number of vehicles we're building, I've got to get nose to the stone and start talking about how we can make this work and business plans and everything. But what's difficult to understand at the moment, if I'm honest, is the crystal ball about what we will be able to legally make. They're talking about, manufacturers are talking about not making IC vehicles. There is a Euro 7 piece of legislation on the table which will come through. So I think people will still make those. I think what will happen is the bar will get so high to achieve that level of emissions controls. I think you'll be forced down synthetic fuels, EV, hydrogen. So it's a journey we're on, and I think we're working with the correct partners on this, but it's a bit of watch this space, and it's not easy. Just looking at that, in 16 we launched this concept. it had a 120-mile range with a 100 miles an hour and 45-minute charge time. What's real difficulty now is the technology is moving so quickly. The way you store the way you have to package the batteries, and the car starts to grow. So it's really key for us to make sure. I think the technology is moving sufficiently quick enough now that the packaging is going to become somewhat easier than it has been in the past. But it's paving the way, and we're literally employing some. One of the difficulties now. Earlier you mentioned employment was mentioned in the word cloud, and getting recruitment. I think EV recruitment is massively challenging because people are paying monumental sums of money for electronics engineers, more than we can dream of paying. So we have to entice people here to be part of this journey and creating the next chapter of history and creating history for Morgan. So we're on that journey as we speak now. Special editions, we're very capable of doing special editions, and the car you see on screen now is a very special limited edition that again takes the brand to a different place. You're talking very low numbers, single digit numbers of special editions, but we've got a few that we're working on at the moment, and this year and next year we'll see some really fantastic special editions, and we'll be doing some marketing work next month, so that you'll see some of the work we're doing. And to finish on, for your eyes only, what's coming next on the three-wheeler? Please don't take any notice of what it looks like. It's a spy shot specifically to do. I can't say too much about what's happening, but it may be sooner than people think. We've just created a product pillar in the last decade. We're not gonna release it and relinquish that sort of segment and that piece we've got. So yeah, that's what's next. Finally, to summarise, if I may, I mean, we've never understood the importance of embracing new technology, never ever. And I think this journey, the journey of the history of the company, but I think really certainly since the 90s and late 90s and 2000, I mean, we've had to really embrace that technology whilst retaining the core skills that give us that differentiation in our market. I don't think there's a better strap line than striking the balance between tradition and modernisation for Morgan. I think it really does fit everything that we endeavour to achieve. We've got a rich history of tradition and technology, and the challenge for us is really to ensure that we don't lose these ingredients, and we keep on the same trajectory as we've been on. I think for all of our businesses, and I'd love to hear from yourselves, but for all of our businesses, nothing's easy. We've just been through, we come out the back of thinking Brexit was going to be the biggest challenge we had in our world, and moving into a pandemic. And I know the pandemic has certainly for me, for Morgan and myself running this business, is, yes, it's been challenging, but actually it's taught us new ways to work. I do struggle a little bit with the working from home bit because we're manufacturers, and you can't make a car at home. Well, you can, but it's certainly not going to be what we want. So I think we've worked really incredibly hard on what we call a one company mentality throughout the pandemic, and we've tried. I've said to everybody, not that I have to be here, I want to be here along with the senior management team to support the manufacturing environment. Yes, of course, it's safe. We've got to make sure we're safe. The primary concern's been ensuring that safety of employees. We've been rigorous on that, but I think the one constant for me is buying, owning and driving a Morgan must be unique, and it must be something that plays into people's leisure time. So very rambling. I was trying to get everything in time. Hopefully I haven't gone over too much, but thank you very much for your time, and thank you for inviting me to talk to you.
Steve, that was amazing. Thank you. A massive round of applause from the whole room. We've written, look, you can see that. We let you keep going because we're hanging on every word. It's been fantastic. It does leave us with a challenge, but it's a good challenge. We've got 10 minutes left. I'm going to rejig the agenda around a little bit. We are going to run over. What I'm going to do is we're going to go straight to questions. Steve, I don't know how long you can stay on with us.
I'll stay as long as you want, because I'm the one that's messed it up.
But bless you, bless you. So, and I'm not sure that everybody in the room can stay be on the scheduled time. Some can. So we're going to do things fleet of foot. We're going to go straight for questions. For those of you that do need to leave at 11:30, there will be a follow-up email where we'll capture what you can do with us next, and the recording, so you can always watch the last bit of the recording if you have to go. But Steve, I'm going to fire, if it's okay with you, some fantastic questions as we go through. If we can crack on with those now, that would be brilliant.
Yeah.
The first one was from Steve Scott. Was it a struggle to implement the safety but keep the character?
Yes, yes, it is. It's getting ever more challenging, I have to say, because the safety with pedestrian impact it will fundamentally change the shapes of vehicles. We've managed it. I think we've managed it okay up to now. It is a challenge, but we've managed it. Can I just say, by the way, is that Sam? Can I see you've got some goggles on there, Sam?
Yeah.
That's perfect. yeah, I think we managed it, Ali. Yeah.
Cool, that's brilliant. We'll come on to Sam actually, because Sam, really, hopefully, Steve, you'll be able to have a look back in the chat. Sam was pointing out about spider silk absorbs energy unlike elastic that releases it again. So he was really tuned into that part of it. And following on with Sam, Sam's asked, have you got off lightly with the microchip shortages that have crippled other auto manufacturers?
Oh, it's our biggest challenge. In 18 months of a pandemic, or 16 months, whatever it is, we've been largely unscathed. Today, this week, last week, raw materials, castings, microchips. We're doing some project work now. We should have 10 cars built. We've only got 2 controllers in the world, and they're on an 18 to 22 week lead time, and it's painful at the moment. So to this point, okay, but I know it's going to become a problem.
No, okay, thanks. So the next couple of questions, we're going slightly out of order, but that's because we've had some interesting questions in. So the nextly I'm coming to Tom Tomlinson's question from Western Mechanical Handling. Can you explain a little bit more, Steve, about the production push to pull model?
Yeah,
at the beginning.
Yeah, so when I joined Morgan, it was a very steeped in tradition and history. It was a piecework system. So if you panelled a body, you used to get, I'm making a number up here, but £25 for panelling a body. If you made a spring cover, you might get £1, but you could make 50 spring covers in the equivalent time you could pan the body. So as an individual, there used to be quite a bit of friction with who got what job when, and what that ends up with, it ends up with an imbalance between departments because they're not got the same focus, and it's the push system. Whereas when we introduced Kanban, which was derived as Japanese, I'm sure some of you are running it, but it's a pull system. So you make it on batch sizes, lead times, usage patterns. So you end up pulling the material you want and pulling the componentry you want. So actually you balance your stocks and you don't get over under stock. And then really going much deeper, you put that inside your MRP. If back in the day, obviously we didn't have MRP, but you put all these things back inside. So it's very much about making the parts you want, and that needed a sea change with the structure of the business, where this piecework was, in fact, I'll be honest with you, it used to come quite fractious at times, because some people would always get the good jobs and some not. So that was the big change we made, to move away from the piecework system to ensure you had balanced production.
Okay, thank you, because that leads really nicely, and you touched on Zoe from KCS's question about that change from push to pull. So given the amount of time that many of your staff have been with your company, how did you manage that culture change?
It's a good question. So it was challenging, Sarah and I, because we had to that system resulted in a complete pay structure system change that was embedded within Morgan since time began, and it was really interesting back in the day, and if Sarah come in the office now, I'm sure she can concur with me, that you had fitting jobs that were being paid more than a 4 or 5 year time served skill job. So you weren't paying in line. So it was really challenging and it was tough, but we did the right thing. It was the right thing to do. It was the right approach to take, and it meant that there were going to be a few people that were upset, and you had to manage expectation. But we did it, and it didn't. If I'm honest, yes, there was a few uppers and downers, but it didn't take long to settle down.
Thank you, Steve. So question from Steve Wanless from Shower Parts. Would you say that Morgan is a marketing-led organisation or manufacturing-led or sales-led?
It's becoming more marketing-led. I think because I touched on the experiential side of the business, and the fact that we make a car falls into many different facets of what we do, and I think it's been manufacturing led, and we've always talked about there's talk about the 8 year. One thing I didn't see come up on the word cloud was, oh, have you still got an 8 year waiting list? Because that used to be the biggest famous thing that everybody said about Morgan. It was that way because it was manufacturing led, and it was stuck in, we're making 9 cars a week and it doesn't matter how far out that stretches, we'll sit with that. I think we've had to become more marketing led. As our choice as consumers becomes far greater, it's become, the toy shop is much bigger. So I think we're having to put more effort, and in fact, it's becoming more and more of a challenge, actually, marketing.
Thank you for that. Dave Cockwell from Cockwell Brilliant Boats. Sorry, Dave. I hope you like that description of you. First of all, he wants to know, Steve, do you own a Morgan? And if you do, which one?
Yeah, I do own a few. Yes, I've got an Aero GT, and I've got an older Aero, and I've got a traditional car as well. I did have a 3-wheel and stupidly sold it last year. I don't know why. I never used it, and I sold it last year. And they're going up and up and up in value. So I'm not quite sure what I did there. I'll have to build myself another one.
We'd love a picture of you in your car. If you can share one with us, that'd be fab. Dave's also asking which ERP system you use.
IFS.
Okay, that's helpful.
IFS. I don't profess to be the architect and the driver of all things IFS, but it is brilliant. We have gone from a standing start. The culture is the biggest issue, and we talked to you about the length of service of employees. I was panicking like fury about when you introduce IFS and terminals on the shop floor for people to log on and off jobs, and everything's measured on. It's going to be a nightmare. I have to say the shop floor has been brilliant. Our after sales, who are a much smaller team. So repairs, so all vehicle repairs, all dealer warranty and things like that, they've been a hard nut to crack. They still try and operate outside on Excel spreadsheets and bits, and we've got to the point now where we've stopped being nice and being harsh. But IFS has been really good. If anybody, by the way, would like any intros to anything that we do, by all means, more than welcome. But IFS has been great, and we're running the business from top to bottom on it now.
Amazing. And so Chris's question was, when did you introduce it, and what were you using before that?
So we had a mix. So we had a mixture before of Sage products. We introduced IFS. The first go live was 3.5 years ago. The first go live. And the reason I'm being blunt, I get a little bit angry with the after sales side of the business, is because they were the first go live, because we purposefully targeted them because of their knowledge base, their small team, fairly highly skilled, thinking that would be, we'll debug it there, understand the challenges, and then we'll try and crack the real nut, which would be manufacturing, because some guy's been there 50 years and it's been the other way around. So the first go live was 3.5 years ago, and we did a phased go live. So we did after sales, what we used to call aero racing, which is now Morgan Works Malvern. We did that first, and then we've gone into sales, then manufacturing and supply chain.
Fantastic, thank you. Question from Belinda from Teagle. Are there areas of the business that you outsource?
So obviously powertrain, from a point of view of BMW or Ford.
Yeah.
There are a number of things we outsource. You know, from a component, tier one component side of things, we do all design is done here. We do nearly all of our media, film and photography here. So if you go on the website to see any films, it's generally, I mean, we do a little bit. We do certain outsourcing of photo shoots and bits and pieces. But generally we do most here. I mean, obviously some of the big suppliers, the Superform, the BMW, the Ford, but we make most of it here otherwise, and look forward to welcoming everybody to the factory, by the way, when you can. So love to show everybody around.
Fantastic. Question from Jeff. Did you or the family change the manufacturing process following the John Harvey Jones visit?
Yes, some of it. Yes, some of it we did, and it was quite interesting because if any of you get a chance to watch the troubleshoot, you can pick it up on iPlayer. I think it's worth a watch. It's just worth a watch for some of the comedy values. If you know, if you'd watch for nothing else, because I remember Sir John calling our sales director the sales prevention officer. Because he used to have his little wooden box and he'd flick through and pick who he wanted to build a car for, rather than looking at the lead time and saying, right, we're going to match lead time. But we did change some things, and we modernized the fact we post them. We definitely modernized the swing towards the embracing of technology. Not that was a massive focus, but that swing has definitely come since then. I wouldn't say that was the key driver, but yeah, we've done some things.
Sure. Nick is asking, as a labour-intensive manufacturing process, how has the staff engagement fluctuated during the growth of the company, and how have you managed that? We get great engagement. We do, you know, I wouldn't lie. When you have such a long-standing workforce, as with any walk of life, you get some people that if you threw £50 notes out on the floor, they wouldn't engage particularly. In the main, everybody's brilliant. We do pre-pandemic, I do town hall meetings with the whole factory, 8 AM, coffee, pastries, and just talk about the key element, the key numbers and details of the business, because it is very difficult to ensure you're communicating with 200 people in the location. So we do that. It's been good, and throughout the pandemic especially, I mean, Sarah's worked tirelessly day and night to make sure that we're engaged. We're just launching an employee app, so an engagement app that they can do everything from quizzes to health and safety to training. So it's an app called Impulse. Historically, we've been pretty good. We've done family fun days. We do, you know, certain work events and things like that. So it's been good. You know, you get the odd hiccup along the way, but with 200 people, I think it's been really strong. Thank you, Steve. Mark Norton is asking, he's interested to know, given your craft-based staff, what percentage of wage cost do you have to sales?
Wage cost of sales.
I feel like putting you on the spot.
No, well, I think if splitting the factory out from the indirect is difficult, rather than me get, because if I because of that 50-50 split now, it's slightly challenging. Can I come back to you on exactly what they say? Only so I don't give anybody a bum steer, because I don't know the direct and indirect.
Cool. I think Mark needs to come up and visit you, and he can ask you that question in person.
I'll ping it into the chat room anyway. Afterwards, I just know that we've had a big swing in the last 18 months with the senior appointments, indirect employees versus the factory floor. So I'd just like to get that 100% right.
Sure. No, that's brilliant. Thank you. Jeff Osborne's asking, how does your overseas operation work, Steve? Do you have sales guys all over the world, or is it all done from Malvern?
So the dealer network slide I showed you, they're all, apart from Morgan Works Malvern and Morgan Works London, they're all independently owned outside of Morgan. So we don't, nothing belongs to us. We have here at the factory, we have regional managers. So we have a UK regional dealer manager, we have a US, a rest of the world, and a Europe. So each of these people look after the region, and they'll communicate with those in the UK 12 dealers, in Europe 22, or whatever it is. And so they'll communicate with those guys like that. And then the Morgan Works Malvern and Morgan Works London dealers. And then London's interesting because there's a lot of international sales go through London. What we do is we have postcode, we operate on a postcode setup for the UK. So if one of yourselves walked into Morgan tomorrow to buy a car, we would, one of the big things that's changed with the distribution and that model is there's a real science behind the buying habit, behind our buying habits as consumers. There is a real science, and I don't profess to know I did a bit of study on it. We had some work done for us. We used to, if you walked into Morgan and said, "Oh, I live in Cornwall," we'd say, "Oh, you've got your nearest dealers in Exmouth," or at the time it could have been Perranporth, when they were a dealer. We would have said to you, "Oh, yeah, it's great, go to your dealer," and we would let you go. And then you'll drive down the road, drive past a Porsche dealer or a motorhome or some other purchase, and you would have bought something else. Today, we would capture you, we would sell you a car, and we would pass that detail back through to your local dealer, providing you were happy for that to be the case. And then we've made sure that we've done that piece of work. The same would happen for global sales. If we had somebody come globally, we would do the same. The CRM, our CRM setup is monumentally complex, not in isolation to itself, in relationship to the distribution network, which is why I said at the outset, I think earlier on in the presentation, I think I would try and set it up differently to start with, because as a Morgan dealer, they tend to feel that the customer belongs to them. And so quite often us getting that information, if Alison Glover walked into a Morgan dealer, us getting your detail off them can, dependent on where you are in the world and what it is and which dealer, can be very difficult. So managing the CRM is a key focus for us at the moment, and we're trying to be innovative in the way we do this. And you do it on, we've got a thing called MRPS, which is the Morgan Rebate MRPS, Morgan Rebate Partnership Subscription. So basically, as a dealer, if you're housekeeping and you do the right disciplines, we would rebate you on certain things. So it's a bit like the way the mainstream automotive industry works on rebate a little bit. So there's an incentive. But globally, if you're in Germany, France, Japan, Italy, it's incumbent on the dealer to take the order, to pass the details, and that's the way it works.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Steve. Two more questions, I promise. We're nearly there. From Belinda again, how large is your marketing department?
So one of the challenges at Morgan, every department, and this has been a real thing from investment. All of our departments tend to be small in number. So our marketing department consists of Toby Blythe, head of marketing, James Gilbert, James Lewis Barnard, and then we support those. So there's 3 guys doing that piece of work, but there are supporting functions. So film photography, CRM activity, dealer management. So they get supported in different ways, but actually the department consists of 3 people, three direct heads in that department.
That's helpful. And last question from Bruce: what criteria do you look for in prospective new hires from a culture match and a business alignment point of view?
That's a really good question, because it's a wrestle that I've had the last 2 years, especially, most importantly, unquestionably, at the senior end of the spectrum. The hires I've had at the senior end of the spectrum, I've had 3 false starts, and I'm talking senior hires on significant salaries in the grand scheme of things. You know, it's not like we're paying terrible wages and you've got to put up with some of the stuff that comes alongside that. That's not the case. In the most senior hires, I have had the biggest trouble, to the point where I've parted company with 3 of the 5 senior hires we've had because I just couldn't cope with a senior chief operating officer wanting to work from home when he's got a factory to run, and I'm here every day saying, and culturally that's been a challenge in getting people at that level to understand that we're running a business that's very much a people business and both internally and externally stakeholder business, that we're making products. So that's been a challenge. From a general staff point of view, we're touch wood, we're very lucky. We're very lucky that we make a product that people come here. The package is good. It's not exceptional. We do wrestle at times with JLR. They're just on the cusp of being geographically a pull against us at times, mainly on CAD and that's that side of the development side of the business. Shop floor side, we're lucky. We're really lucky. We tend to get apprentices and even time served people that come in. I think they're amazed just how busy the environment is, but culturally we don't struggle out. I would definitely say I'd really like to hear from yourselves on if you're taking senior hires, just how you're seeing it, because that's been my biggest challenge. And I only had the conversation yesterday about some chief commercial appointment, and our investors, the investors actually said to me, oh, you might struggle to get them to come here all the time. And I said, well, what would you say if I didn't come here all the time? So I do struggle a little bit on that side of it.
Steve, that's brilliant. I just have to say a massive thank you on behalf of the whole room. Some people who've had to leave have found this morning incredibly helpful and useful. I feel like we've scratched the surface, because I think the questions could have gone on, could go on all morning. But what is coming out, and the bit that I just wanted to touch on next, is we are planning a visit up to the factory at the end of September. All of those ERDF eligible businesses in Cornwall, that will be funded through the Future Focus programme for you. For those that aren't eligible, I think there's probably a very strong desire that we bring you along too. But when we were chatting to Steve yesterday, I hope we can get a really nice good round table with you, Steve, where some of these more detailed questions we might be able to run past you. So on behalf of the whole room, a fantastic presentation. Thank you, Steve. It's been riveting all the way through. For the people in the room, I just wanted to wrap up for you. We've got a whole series of activity that's going to follow this. We've got our team at Exeter University that are going to be running sessions. I'm going to really gallop through the slides, but you'll have this information available to you post the session. We'll email it out to you. So a brilliant collaboration and innovation support workshop. How do you tap into a lot of the things that Steve's been talking about today in terms of collaborating with finding funding, universities. The next one we're having a look at, we've got a session on business to business marketing for manufacturers. Marketing's a massive drive now as you're growing, Steve. So Dr. Bill Russell from the university, hugely experienced in this, is going to be running a webinar on that session. Then the next thing we've got, Dr. Alan Alexander will help you work through his radical innovation playbook. So again, if you've got that opportunity to have a look at your business, look at where you're innovating, that's another great workshop. We're also using, if we can skip on again, we Lego are probably one of the best examples of innovation in terms of their innovation process. We use the Lego Serious Play process to have a look at and work out some of the things that are going on in your business today. We've got Ruth and the team at Exeter University who are really skilled in facilitating those sessions for you. We've also got a brilliant session run by the Exeter University, The Wonder of Graphene. So one of the most exciting new materials that for you to explore. So there's a session coming up early in July on that. And the Uber Lab. The Uber Lab is the visit to come and see Steve, to spend time at the factory, time with Steve. We're also working with Steve to have a look at other businesses and organizations in the area that we could arrange as part of that visit, a visit to the Manufacturing Centre of Excellence, which is just, I think, on your doorstep. So today is just the start. It's just the introduction of what I think can be a fantastic journey and really build our relationship with Steve. And there are no doubt collaboration opportunities with the businesses across Cornwall. We do have a groupie in the room. We do have a couple that hired a Morgan for their wedding car. Jeff and Amanda didn't quite get to that bit on the survey, on the quiz. But Steve, on behalf of all of us, and Eric, I'm sure you'll concur, on behalf of the whole group, a massive thank you. We've absolutely loved having you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And we'll put some cars on, Alison, if people want to come to the factory, they can have a drive and all that. So
amazing. For those of you that can say, we have got a very quick competition for you, and the prize of that competition was going to be one of those driving spots when you do the visit, as well as a lovely Cornish treat. So if you've got 5 or 10 minutes, hopefully we can do it in that time. Stay on. We want the competitiveness of the Cornwall manufacturers in the room. Pull up your Pole EV again, and we will round up the morning testing your knowledge on what you've learned this morning. So if you can, the link, if you've lost it, is at the top there. So it's polev.com, unlocking pot 031. Sophie's just popped it in the chat. There's 1,000 points per answer. So for everyone that you get correct, speed counts, so move fast. Okay. So the first question, get ready, everybody, to compete. How much do you know about Morgan? So first question, when was Morgan founded? The answers will be coming up on the screen. Is it 1905, 1907, 1909? You've got 4 seconds, 3, 2, 1. And the answer is 1909. You were all listening really well. Who was the fastest finger? Who's top of the leaderboard? Let's have a look. Bruce is at the top of that leaderboard. Well done, Bruce. Followed closely by Jim. And 2 guests. So we'll have to work out who you are. You needed to put your name in at the beginning to win this one. Let's go on to the next question. What was the first car that Morgan produced? Was it the 3-wheeler, the +4, or the +6? So click away. And the answer is, of course, the 3-wheeler. All of you got that. That's brilliant. Who was the fastest? Let's have a look. Bruce, Jim and the guests are still at the top there. Okay. Keep going, everybody. What are the 3 core elements that make up a Morgan car? So we've got oak carbon leather, ash aluminium leather, oak aluminium leather, ash carbon aluminium. Oh, that's the tricky one. Let's have a look. Who got that right? Of course, it's ash, aluminium and leather. Most of you got that one right. Who was the quickest? Bruce is holding on. Bruce, Jim and the guests are holding on to that top spot. It's looking good. Next question. What was premiered at the Geneva Motor Show in 2016? Let's have a look. A carbon neutral 3-wheeler, an electric 3-wheeler, or a self-driving 3-wheeler? What's the answer to that one? Let's have a look. The answer, of course, is the electric three-wheeler. Who was the quickest on that one? Oh, one of our guests has dropped out. So we've still got the top three, Bruce and Jim, stonking away there. Next question. What's the approximate lead time for a Morgan car? 3 to 6, 6 to 12, 12 to 24, or 24 months plus? What do you think it is? Let's have a look at the answer. 6 to 12 months. That's really interesting that lots of you thought it was different to that. So how's that affected the, oh, look, that has changed the leaderboard. So we're not, our guests are back up the top, but we're not sure who they are. Sam is racing up, Bruce and Jim have dropped down. So approximately how many cars does Morgan produce each year? The answer's is it 200, 400, 800? I think we should get 100% success rate on this one. We know you covered this one, Steve. Are we ready? Of course, the answer is 800. Ah, some of you weren't listening. Let's see what that does. Leaderboard guests are still at the top. Sam is gallivanting. Bruce and Jim are still holding on there. Steve coming up quickly. So next question. What is the starting price of a Morgan car? It's the three-wheeler. Okay. So is it 40, 50 or 60K? And the answer is 40K. Interesting. I think you could charge more, Steve. There we go. Who was at the top with that one? Oh, we've still got that guess, but look, Bruce is coming up there. Come on. Let's see. We're nearly there with the questions. A bonus question. Are you ready? Would you like to know the results of the quiz to find out who won? So let's see. Oh, of course. No, somebody's not interested, but that's all fine. So what does that leaderboard look like? Whoa. So we've got guest 556. Team in the background, are you able to let me know who that potentially is?
Does it want to put their hand up? You might have to have their hand.
It might, yeah. No, or pop it in the chat. I think it was me. So we think it might be Andrew Poole. So Andrew, congratulations. Bruce is a close second. Both of you guys will get a go on the track. So thank you for participating in that, guys. I hope that was a good bit of fun for us to close on. We have got lots of support for you through the Future Focus programme for those eligible businesses in Cornwall. Today is just the start, as we've said. Today is about inspiration. It's about helping you to think differently about your business, learn from other really inspirational manufacturers. Hopefully the follow-on workshops are going to give you a really good flavour and more time to work together in groups and experiment. We've got a fantastic research team. Our team of business development managers will work one-to-one with you and work out what you need as part of your innovation journey. So if that is a piece of research, if that's about exploring collaborations, if it's about recruitment, we've talked today about recruitment being a huge issue. There's some funding support to help you to recruit. There are small grants available through this program for rapid prototyping, whatever you might need to do. And of course we can signpost you to other brilliant programs. So there's a huge amount on offer. We've got a fantastic coaching bank of people that you can tap into. If you need to take a step back out of your business and spend some time online doing our growth and innovation planning sessions, they're hugely valuable. So lots and lots on offer, culminating in that visit with Steve, hopefully, fingers crossed, end of September, all being well, with getting this pandemic behind us. So the team will be in touch. There will be follow-up. and we're really delighted to have spent the morning with you. Glad that so many of you could stay on, and I'll just close again with another. I'm a huge Morgan fangirl now, Steve. Amazing morning. We've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think minds are buzzing here in Cornwall. So fantastic. Thanks everybody. We as you've held on, if Steve, if anybody's got any questions directly for Steve that's still here, we can probably stand for a couple more minutes. But remember, we have got access to him in September. Nick, go on, pop. Fire away.
I think he was waving goodbye, Ali.
Oh, is he waving goodbye? I thought he was putting his hand up. Okay, no worries. Anybody wanted to pop their microphone on and have a chat to Steve, is fine to go. I think we've probably stretched everybody's time that they had available with us this morning. But Eric, how was that for you?
Absolutely fascinating, Ali. That was really good, and with me as with many others, I'm sure it echoed a lot. It just shows that the challenges we all meet as manufacturers are not unique. And to hear someone like Steve, from such a fantastic company as Morgan saying, I still struggle with recruitment, it's supply chain, it's the same problems for everybody, and we shouldn't forget that. And it's great to hear that from outside of our bubbles, because we've all been in bubbles the last year or so. So no, absolutely fantastic, and I can't wait to see the factory.
That's brilliant. Thanks for that, Eric. Anybody else? Sam, come on, if you're still there, just ask the question directly.
Hello, Steve. I was just going to ask, do you guys run PPAP, the production part approval process?
No, we don't, Sam. I mean, a number of our tier 1 suppliers obviously run them into us. We don't enforce that. We've just done. We're just right in the process of doing a lot of work on, for the first time in our history, actually, a big supplier manual. So we're looking at all of the supplier requirements for anti-slavery and all of the things that I've got to push out from a private equity point of view. So we're looking at the suppliers for what they currently run. We don't enforce it here, no.
Yeah, no, I'm just interested because I'm currently dragging. Yeah, we're having to go through PPAP at the moment for the end. Yeah, for our end customer, and it's pretty brutal going from zero to sort of PPAP compliance.
Yeah. Well, we're just looking at 14,001. So we're 9,001. We're just looking at 14,001. Yeah. But the supplier manual is the supplier manual is an interesting piece of work actually for us, especially on the ESG and the carbon neutrality. So we have to go for our scope 3 emissions. We have to go right the way down through the supply chain to see where products are coming from, the packaging, and that's quite brutal. That's been one of the real toughest for us this year is that ESG reporting and the carbon footprint reporting, scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions.
Yeah, I mean, there's some interesting pieces of software and services coming in to provide all of that, but that's I guess another minefield is finding the right ones and finding the ones that are evolved enough to actually be useful within your sector, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, by the way, Sam, just on a different note, I need to make sure we've got a 3-wheeler here for you when you turn up at the factory.
Yeah, for the Halcyons.
Yeah, that's it.
That's a good thing. I guess the 3-wheelers need less microchips as well.
Well, saying that, no, they still need them, and unfortunately, now with the technology, everything needs it. So
that's the problem. We've just launching a product and have an order for 230 units, and I've managed to get 230 of the chips needed on my credit card from the States. But then after that, that's it. There's 2022 lead time. It's brutal.
I know. It is brutal, the whole thing.
Thank you for your time.
When you've got a car and it can be one component that's stopping a 80, 90, 100,000 pound car. So
yeah, Well, it stopped Jaguar, isn't it? So
Yeah. Sort of bigger people than us. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Um,
Brilliant.
Ali, just
Yeah.
on those wages costs.
Yeah,
Just I can't remember who asked it, but
it was
just
Mark.
yeah. So the overall. So we split it between direct and indirect, and we're looking at just over 7 million, which is it's a fairly equal split. It's a 53-47% split between direct and indirect.
Okay.
So it's interesting actually, because if I look at the number of people, just to give everybody on in the room a flavour, sort of 120 direct employees represents 3.8 million versus versus 78 indirects, which represents 3.4 million. So it's quite an interesting split actually.
Yeah.
We further split it from there, by the way, into obviously all of the buckets, but I just want to get an exact cost.
Thank you. I'll share that with Mark. I'm seeing him tomorrow, so yeah, no, he'll be, and no doubt he'll grill you on that when he comes to see you.
I was just thinking, by the way, I'm actually staying in Cornwall in a few weeks in my aero. So if anybody's, I will be in Cornwall in my aero.
We'll look out for you. Give us a call, and we well, hopefully if it's open, we might be able to grab a coffee.
Hopefully the sun's shining.
Yeah. Come and visit Falmouth, Sam saying, with the world press. Hopefully they'll be gone by then. Guys, I'm gonna bring things to a close.